That's what they did. And so Clarence Jordan, who wrote the Cotton Patch Gospels, amazing man. I love Clarence, but he was wrong about one thing, which was, he said, let's just live our little community the way we are here. We'll be the example, we'll be a light, but let's not get involved in politics. So SNCC workers could stay at Koinonia, and they did, but he never joined the marches. They never organized, mobilized, they always just lived it. Gonna live it here. And they did, by God, they did, but they didn't get involved in the movements to change it. And here's what happened. That worked for the white members of Koinonia, but not for the black members. Because if you're white, when you leave Koinonia, you can disappear into the culture of whiteness and you can be okay. You leave Koinonia and you're black, you face a whole system of brutal segregation that doesn't change when you're in the community. So I love Clarence, but he was wrong when he said, don't vote. Don't get involved, don't try to change it. We have to lead by example, and then we have to be the catalysts to spark movements to change things that can only be changed by politics and voting and moving people to new places. But how do we do that? Well, not by just lobbying and having access. Washington, D.C., well, they love access. They want to give you access because for most people, access is enough. They returned my call. They called me. They want to have a meeting. I was in the room. I talked to them. I talked to him. I'm on his council. I guess I'm done. Access without content, without results, is nothing but co-option. And they'll give that to you. And in Washington, D.C., most people want, that's all they need. Give me access. That's good enough for fundraising, frankly. Satisfy your board. It doesn't change things. So when people come to D.C. and they're going to lobby, I often meet with them. And some of you heard me talk about the wet finger politician. You know, the politicians are, here's how you recognize a member of Congress, they say. They're walking around with their finger in the air, and they lick it to see which way the wind is blowing. See, what King understood is you only change a country when you change the wind. When he went to Selma, he changed the wind. The wind changed, and Johnson was able to do the right thing. I want Barack Obama to do the right thing, but he's not doing it, and he won't without our help. And when he was elected, he had enough insight to say, I think 2 days later he said, I won't accomplish anything without the wind of a movement at my back. Back when his old friends had his emails, that disappeared quickly. I emailed that night back and I said, yeah, and a wind at your front to clear the way and pull you along when necessary. I don't think they've learned that yet, but I don't think we've learned it either. Because we're either just kind of folding our arms saying, let's see how he's doing. Or we think, well, just about what I do in my little patch, my neighborhood, my community. We'll just kind of, you know, the Peter Morin, the new growing up in the shell of the old. That's what we do as our identity, but then our mission is to change the world. Now, you can put too much trust in politics and make it an idol, and many do, or you can put too little in it and think that you can do this. You can't get a Voting Rights Act until you win the votes for it. You can't end apartheid until finally those in power relinquish power and agree to have an election. And you know, the people who mentored me, they marched and they fought and they died to vote. I was there for the first election in South Africa. When those folks lined up by the thousands and slept overnight to vote, it meant a lot to them. But if you think voting is enough, we're sadly mistaken. All right, now I've already talked too much, but I want to talk about how we change things without succumbing to the idol of politics. It's either way too important or it's not important at all. How do we find that balance? Okay, now, I think, can we hear each other if we speak up loud? Okay. Let's try to focus on this issue of politics and faith in politics and anything related to that you want to ask me. I'll try and respond as best I can, and then we'll just kick it around for a while. Yes, and try and speak up.
So Wisconsin recently has had serious change, a sea tide of politics. It's becoming more dictatorial, and the people have risen up in response, and they filled the courthouse, the state capitol, numerous days, and occupied it. We watched it, the news stations that covered it, we watched it. It looks like all of that activity, all that passion, hasn't led to a whole lot of results yet, and it feels, to maybe some of us who are younger, gosh, we're disillusioned. Even if we do mobilize, nothing happens. So can you speak to that? Maybe a more veteran perspective here might be helpful.
You think I'm old?
No, veteran.
I do think there is a kind of there is something in us in this culture, in America especially, that we really do require almost instant gratification. In this last book I did, I said we've got new maxims now. Greed is good. It's all about me, and I want it now. And in the want it now, there was this comedian. I read his monologue, and he's on a plane, and the flight attendant says, "We now have wireless internet. You can do your emails over Chicago, but it's broken today." The guy says, "This is bullshit, bullshit." He's mad because he just lost something he didn't know existed 10 seconds ago. You know? So I do think sometimes we don't understand the sort of dynamic and process of history. Vincent Harding, who I said goodbye to this morning, he was here and is one of the mentors of mine. He talks about you can't start a movement, you can prepare for one. And he loves Hebrews, the cloud of witnesses. You know, he talks about, you know, those who have run the race before. And the text, if you dig into it, it really says that those who are our family tree, our foremothers and fathers, their mission, their success, their vocation is connected to ours. So businesses, it's like they're in the stands and you're on the field. I always thought, oh man, Dorothy Day is up there cheering for me, and you know, Martin and Malcolm, and we're in the middle of the mud, and they're saying, it's okay, you know, we're with you. We did it, you're doing it, it's okay. It takes time, it takes training, it takes discipline. And over time, I mean, I was there for the inauguration of Nelson Mandela. I was there, and the master of ceremonies was Desmond Tutu. And I was there 10 years before, and I saw the pain and the cost, and I would go around the townships. I talked to 14-year-olds in Soweto, 14-year-old kids. I would say, will your children breathe free air in South Africa? And 14-year-olds look me in the eye and they say, I will see to it. When 14-year-olds are talking about the future of their children, I knew that apartheid was going to fall. Not easily, not quickly, but going to fall. Wisconsin is very important because people didn't just take it. They rose up. And so part of what we have to do, and I don't know all the answers here. I'm not doing well in doing my little part of changing these decisions. Because I said to the artists, you can't change the decisions until you change more of the conversation. The conversation in the country is what affects the decision. Artists are good at changing conversations. So I've had some artists here say, you ought to get us together like maybe a year out from some big thing that we want to do, and then we'll start working on the soundtrack for the movement. We'll start writing the songs and doing the music. So by the time we're ready to roll it out, people will be hearing about this, the music, and singing this, and they'll be more ready. So how do we learn the disciplines of training and preparation and what nonviolent direct action looks like? And you know, when we saw Egypt happen what I call the Egypt moment. A lot of us were watching that, and we thought, they're doing some pretty smart things. They've got their logistics. You read between the lines and watch what's their logistics are pretty sound. The way they're doing their medical stuff, their security stuff, and when they got attacked, they did the right things. And I said, someone's been doing this didn't just happen. Someone's been doing some training, serious training. Sure enough, New York Times, my Gene Sharp, the great nonviolent strategist outside of Boston, his books are the best. They've been studying the books in Croatia and Serbia, and folks from Egypt were being trained there. And training it didn't just happen, the Egypt moment. Training was going on. But that's a long-term perspective. Actually, that's what people of faith, can do. Long-term perspective. But yeah, sometimes we're too short-sighted. Yes, please.
This morning I was in a session where we were talking about polarization of politics in America and coming together, how we facilitate conversation between such polar opposite sides.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how to bring things together to enhance conversation?
Yeah. Thank you for asking that. We are stuck. Washington, D.C. is stuck in polarized, but so are we. There is a political correctness on the left just as much as there is on the right. And people can get abused from both sides. I shared in another session that I was up in the Congress 2 weeks ago with Walter Jones from South Carolina. He's a
North Carolina.
Did I say South? North.
Get it right.
North. But we're here in South Carolina, right? North Carolina.
All right.
I thought he was from Georgia. No. What district?
Third.
Okay. North Carolina. So,
Third district.
And he's a Republican.
what one?
Third district.
Third district, just as I remember. Third district. North Carolina. So he wanted to talk, and we interviewed him for Sojourners. It'll be in the next issue. Conservative Republican, born Baptist, now Catholic. And he said, I voted for the war in Iraq. I suspected, in fact, I believe the intelligence was faulty. But my district includes Camp Lejeune, and there's 60,000 military retirees, and I was afraid of my reelection. I voted for the war in Iraq, and it was a sin.
Yeah.
It was a sin.
Yeah.
And now my penance is to write to every family of a fallen service member, and he's written 10,000 letters so far. And now he is the leader on the Republican side of the anti-war movement. So what I look for is courage. I don't look for agreement on everything I believe. I look for courage. If we start just where we don't agree with folks, we're just going to have an argument that goes on all day long. When you start with what you agree with, this circle of protection we formed around these budget cuts, the Roman Catholic, the U.S. Conference of Bishops has joined this. Do we agree on everything? No, we don't. The National Association of Evangelicals, the Salvation Army, the American Bible Society, National Council of Churches. The National Association of Evangelicals and the National Council of Churches are like the Crips and the Bloods. I did gang truce work for years. Bloods, Crips, Latin Kings, Gangster Disciples. It got me ready for working with the churches. It really helped to prepare me. Because we got gangs, and we got grievances, and we got factions, and we got paraphernalia, we got it all. So when the NCC and the NAE are at the same table, I like to have a Mennonite to put between them, just in case something happens. But in the White House now, on this budget, you've got a circle of protection. And I'll tell you, when you're up against the whole row of the administration leaders, and we're on the other side of the table. On one side of me is the Roman Catholic bishops. other side is the National Association of Evangelicals. And they know they're not just dealing with sojourners and bread for the world. They're dealing with really the entire, and now Jewish and Muslims have joined. Everyone's there, and all the low-income groups. We are united now, like, we're going to give this president a chance to do the right thing. But really give him, be in his face till he does the right thing. Getting poor people off the table of the budget cutting. And that would be possible if I said, oh, NAE, there are several things I don't agree with you about. Can we have that discussion? Now, the truth is, once you have a relationship, you end up having better discussions about a lot of other things along the sides and the edges of the conversation. But I think we have to learn what it means to find common ground by moving to higher ground. That's what I think we're trying to do. Lots of hands. Okay, please.
Hi, Jim. I'm
Betsy?
It seems to me that we almost have to have a double narrative, one for the internal movement and one for outside, and I'm thinking of Afghanistan. Internally, it doesn't help us to say all the work that COPEAC and Peace Action did to get the mayors, U.S. mayors,
Yeah.
to come out with a resolution.
Isn't that great?
All the work that they did to get 27 senators to
Yeah.
write to the president about Afghanistan 2 weeks before his
Yep.
decision. All that we did to get 207 congressmen to vote for McGovern's amendment to put a timeline.
McGovern-Jones Amendment.
McGovern-Jones amendment,
Yeah.
that's right. We can't say, oh, that came to nothing. We only got 33,000 troops out. We have to understand that the president is in an untenable situation. He's got to take certain steps, and then in a way, 33,000 was a victory. Because what we were hearing coming from the military was 5,000. So I think we ought to take some credit, say the movement is working as hard as they can and is making progress. We're not just sitting on our, we're making progress, we're doing some stuff, but then when we talk to the president, we also have to say, 33,000 is not enough, we're sorry. We
Yeah.
have to have more, we have to keep going, you have to get more troops out of there, and
Yeah.
again, see what he's working with in his
Yeah.
untenable situation.
I was with McGovern in his office a month before, and he didn't believe they were going to get anywhere near 200 votes. He was discouraged. He said, we're not going to get the votes. It's going to go on forever. And then we got 207 votes and 28 Republicans. And then the president didn't just do what Petraeus said this time. He did more. And my blog the next day was entitled, It's Not Enough. Because we don't say, okay. But in this case, public opinion now is running 60% against the war in Afghanistan. 60%. So a president could really lead now based on the shift in public opinion. So I think, Johnson, Lyndon Johnson, take him for example. There's parts of Johnson that really wanted to do the right thing on civil rights. And it was personal. He had an African-American maid that was a family, part of the family. And, for all his white Southern stuff, he was in love with that. He loved that woman, and the thought of her having to get out of her car on a long trip, an older woman, and squat on the side of the road instead of using a bathroom, just broke his heart. And he had her on his mind when he said, I'm going to do this even if it loses the South to the Democrats, which it did. So, but on his own, he told King, I can't do it. King made it possible. King created a space for someone like Johnson to walk into. There are members of Congress who I have known that will do the right thing even if it costs them the next election. They're there, but I still don't need more than one hand to count them. They're more like Johnson and Obama, who want to do the right thing and tell you that all the time, but don't quite get there without some real help from the outside. Yes, sir.
Jim, there's one idol that you didn't mention that kind of keeps us from gaining critical mass here, and it's comfort. If we're going to be blunt and honest, this can is full of comfortable white people. And, these previous movements you talked about, that were backed by the church and everything, were largely paid in blood. going to have to be called upon to sacrifice blood. But for this thing to get moving, we're going to, I'm a businessman. If I start speaking out, it's going to cost me money. It's not going to cost me blood, but it's going to cost me money. It's going to cost me comfort. Yeah. And that is an idol, and we got to face that. You know.
Yeah. Now then.
We're getting training. We're getting motivation. This, for it to maintain it, we've got to go back and say, okay, I'm going to invest a piece of my life in this.
The war in Afghanistan goes on every day, mostly because the war in Afghanistan impacts 1% of the American people. Only 1% are impacted, and they're terribly impacted, brutally impacted. Only 1%. Now, I am enough of a veteran to remember the war in Vietnam, and I cut my teeth on that war, and we could put 10,000 people in the street in about 2 hours' time at Michigan State. Well, there was a draft. There was a draft, and I remember the night of the lottery, where every kid my age was watching a television show, and our birthdays gave us a number. And it was pretty clear how far down in the numbers they would need to go before they had enough. So if your number was above a certain predicted level, you know, you're in serious trouble. If you're below, you're probably okay. And I sat with my generation that night watching what was going to happen with the rest of our lives. There was a lot of drinking that night, some celebratory and some in utter despair. And when Nixon decided to end the draft and try and diffuse the anti-war movement, I was one of the ones who says he's a fool. He's a fool to think that by ending the draft, he can end our commitment, our passion. We're going to organize just as effectively, and overnight, we were in the little room, the inner circle of the activists, and we lost most of our constituency, almost overnight, because the war didn't affect, white, middle class, suburban sons and daughters of business people. It no longer affected them. The Vietnamization of the war is what he called it. And the war went on for a much longer time, and the energy against it was dissipated. So we, particularly as people of faith, we're part of our faith is that sacrifice for what we courage is what we're supposed to be known for here. So leading by example is going to be pretty important here. I'm looking for some more younger voices, but we'll see. I'm sorry. 5-1. Maybe last question, right here.
Wait a second.
You mentioned CEOs coming to visit you and how Washington is directed by money. Can we enlarge our vision and go after the whole military-industrial complex, not be satisfied with influencing legislators, but get into the power holders?
Targeting corporations as well as government. That's a whole yes, and we often target where the rules aren't being made. A lot of this will come down to the issue I want to talk about tomorrow, which is about vocation. Vocation. A whole lot of folks, younger people in the middle of their life cycle, and retired folks are all asking now a really important question about vocation. Vocation is not the same as career. And tomorrow I want to talk about how finding our vocation may be critical to all of these issues. I wish we could talk for an hour, but thank you very much. I appreciate the time.
We do have several gym spots over here for sale.